Thank you, Phil. Very accurate pronunciation. And thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm very, very glad to be here today to talk about what is happening behind the scenes when students use AI for writing. So the debate is already familiar. I know you're very familiar with the debate. We hear about efficiency, about language support with regards to AI. We hear about issues with academic integrity, learning loss, dependence, even the end of writing. And most of the AI discourse speaks about students. It makes assumptions about how they use AI. What is less visible is what students themselves say about it. And that was the puzzle that I wanted to solve or address, if you like. So I wanted to understand how students themselves experience AI assisted writing, what it means to them when they write, when they do their academic work, their writing in a second language with the help of AI. And this matters for us pedagogically, because if we misunderstand students' experiences of AI, we risk designing pedagogical responses that solve the wrong problems. So the first part of the session is going to be a little bit about my research. I'm not going to get into much detail there. I'm going to talk about the findings, and then in the second part, I've chosen 4 takeaways for us, what we can learn with regards to the findings. So yes, I'm a senior lecturer in educational technology and TESOL at De Montfort University. Very happy to be here and very happy to see my colleagues from the Center of English Language Learning as well. Thank you for coming. So, I conducted research on L2 students' experiences with AI-assisted writing, and I was interested in the student-led experiences, student-led uses with AI, ad hoc uses, what students do on their own when they write. So, as I said, I'm not going to get into much detail with regards to methodology because we don't have the time, but I do want to frame the study a little bit. So I used phenomenography, which is a qualitative approach that maps the different ways people experience a phenomenon. And phenomenography places a lot of value on exploring the phenomenon from the participant's perspective, which was exactly what I wanted to understand. So my aim was not to measure effects, not to measure whether AI is bad or good, but the range of experiences, what it feels for students. So I did phenomenographic interviews, which is a particular type of semi-structured interviews with 32 participants across the UK, all from different backgrounds, all using English as a second or additional language, and as I said, across the UK from 26 higher education institutions, different backgrounds and different educational levels. So now the findings. So the study identified 6 categories, 6 different ways students experience AI-assisted writing. These are not type of students. They are ways of making sense of the same phenomenon. So the categories are hierarchical. Each one includes and builds on the previous one, which is very typical of phenomenography. I don't know if we have any phenomenographers here. But don't worry, because I'm going to explain everything. So now, these are the 6 categories. So the first 3 categories are about coping with barriers and surviving academic writing. So in category 1, students use AI to achieve better grades. As simple as that. This is what they say. So writing is very linked for them to assessment. So they use AI for accuracy, register, proofreading, getting the language right so that the work receives a better grade. This is what students say. Now, in category 2, the intentionality changes. Students use it in the same way, but they want to achieve clarity, so they draft their own assignments, their assignments in their own English, and then they use AI to help them say what they already mean, only more clearly. So they say that AI helps them to write in a way that the reader will understand. And they use generative AI, translation tools, paraphrasers, all these are AI tools, sometimes one after the other or, together. Now, in category 3, AI supports workload management. So here students use AI in similar ways to earlier categories, but the intentionality is different. So they describe writing in English as disproportionately more difficult and more time consuming than writing in their L1. And AI helps them to cope with deadlines, with volume, with cognitive load, etc. So across these 3 categories, AI helps students to navigate assessment systems, communication challenges, and workload. Now, moving on, from category 4 onwards, AI-assisted writing is about development. So we are moving from coping to development. In category 4, very interesting, AI helps students habituate, and this is the word that they use, habituate, condition themselves to academic norms that are unfamiliar or insufficiently explained to them, such as reflection, criticality, coherence. We're very familiar with this academic culture, but it is not so easy for students to understand and, importantly, apply. So students ask AI questions like, how can I be more critical here? Or how do I reflect in this section? And they say, I found this very interesting, they say that before AI, struggling to understand this new academic culture created a sense of exclusion and inequality compared to native speakers, compared to home students. So they see AI, they see AI as something that helps them to belong in this new academic culture, which is very relevant to the theme of today's symposium. So now category 5 is AI is experienced as a way to increase interaction and engagement with writing. So students say that it compensates for a perceived lack of interaction and feedback with a tutor or their peers. AI, this back and forth that they have with AI and discuss their essay, activates them. It acts as a scaffold that helps them to think and maintain momentum with writing. They do not blame the tutor for not sending the detailed feedback or the frequent feedback that they need, but they do identify feedback gaps in the system. And finally, category 6, finally for my research, so AI is experienced as a way for increasing sophistication in academic writing. So students describe it as a new way of writing, as something that empowers them, as something that amplifies their voice, as something that they approach with agency and control. So they try to achieve eloquence, to strengthen their arguments, and they say that they engage in long iterations with AI, back and forth, refining, changing the output so that the output and what they write aligns with their own voice. And what they say, and what I found very interesting, is that this emphasis, maintaining this control and agency so that AI doesn't take over, is what supports their development as writers. This is how they feel. So the research goes deeper, of course, into how students understand the impact, the limitations of AI, how they negotiate reliance on these systems, questions about academic integrity. For instance, in the more sophisticated categories, students talk about academic integrity in terms of personal ethos. So whatever they produce with AI has to reflect their voice as academic writers. In contrast, in the less sophisticated categories, 1, 2, 3, integrity is more about compliance, external compliance, following rules to avoid accusations of plagiarism, editing the output so that the output doesn't trigger detection, etc. So the key message is this. There are different ways students use AI, not just one way, and all of them are part of the same phenomenon. Some ways are about getting through, others about deepening engagement with writing. So what matters most for pedagogy is not the tool, is not AI, but the intentionality behind the use, because this is where the implications lie. Speaking of which, I have chosen 4 implications, 4 takeaways for today that I find very relevant for today's theme. There are other findings and other implications, but I had to be selective for today. So let me check on the time, okay? So let's get started with the takeaways. Number 1, I'm going to start with language because this is where a lot of debate tends to land. So a common assumption in research, in everyday conversations, and this came up in my literature review as well, is that when L2 students, international students, use AI for writing, they are mainly using it to fix language, grammar accuracy register, sentence level polishing, copying and pasting. And in my data, this is part of the picture, especially in the earlier categories. But what my findings complicate is that across students' accounts, language is also something that students work through to develop writing at higher levels. So how ideas are expressed, how arguments are built, how texts hold together, how academic voice develops. So when students work with AI on all these, they are not only aiming for optimization, they are also trying to create meaning, to write with more rhetorical control, if you like. So students' engagement with language is not limited to surface correctness. And I think this matters for pedagogy because if we only read AI use as language fixing, we risk missing the writing work that is actually happening, and we risk designing support that is too narrow. Now, takeaway 2, efficiency. Efficiency is one of the most common ways AI is talked about, and in my data, efficiency is real. So in earlier categories, students do use AI to save time, to manage workload, to cope with the extra effort of writing in a second language. Not necessarily to outsource, but to cope with all these problems for them, to meet deadlines, etc. So this is not about denying efficiency and saying that efficiency doesn't exist, but efficiency doesn't capture the full experience. So as engagement becomes more intentional and more sophisticated, writing with AI becomes less linear, less easy. And students describe spending a lot of time checking, reshaping, reworking outputs. They go back and forth with a tool, the test phrasing. They adjust tone, they reorganize structure, they resist formulaic responses that do not reflect their meaning or do not reflect their voice. So the more sophisticated the engagement with AI, the less it feels like a shortcut for students. And the more it feels like writing itself, messy, iterative, and time-consuming. So the key point here is that efficiency may help explain why students turn to AI in the first place, but sophisticated writing involves labor with or without AI. Third takeaway, intentionality. This came up, I mean, phenomenography is about intentionality in the first place. And my findings shift attention away from judging AI uses are good or bad and towards understanding the intentionality behind it. So across students' accounts, what they describe, AI is used with clear purposes in mind, even when those uses look simple or instrumental or on the surface. So when students use AI, they respond to very concrete writing demands or problems to them, assessment expectations, clarity in a second language, workload, sustaining momentum. So these uses are shaped by the pressures students experience when writing in English. This is what students say. So the problem with labeling some uses are shallow or deficient or problematic is that it ignores this condition. So when we focus only on what students do with AI, without asking why they do it, we may miss the reasons that drive this engagement. And these reasons matter because they help us understand the problems that they are trying to solve. And when we understand the problems, we are in a much better position to respond through teaching, through feedback, assessment design, institutional support. So the key point here is not to excuse misuse, but to move beyond judgment and to consider the writing challenges students are negotiating, L2 students in higher education. So not about what students do, but why they do it. Now, the final takeaway is about integrity, of course, and in much of the debate around AI and writing, integrity is treated as a matter of compliance. So following rules, avoiding plagiarism, not getting caught. And in my findings, this is how integrity is understood in earlier categories. So when students use AI mainly to cope with grades, language demands, workload, they frame integrity in terms of external rules and institutional expectations. But this is not where students' understanding stops. As students become more intentional in their engagement with AI and more invested in writing quality, they frame integrity in terms of authorship, in terms of ownership, in terms of voice. So they ask questions such as, does this sound like me? Is this still my thinking? Am I comfortable calling this text mine? How can I change this so that it is mine, so that it reflects my voice? So integrity is not linked to AI. It is linked to students' relationship with writing and what writing means to them. And I believe that this is very, very important for us because it suggests that we cannot teach integrity as a checklist or just enforce integrity. To support integrity about AI, we should support students' relationship with writing. So helping students to develop a sense of authorship, responsibility, ownership over the texts, including when they write with AI. So I believe the key point here is not to loosen standards. This is not what I'm saying. Not to loosen standards about misconduct, but to recognize that integrity is situated, it is evolving, and it depends on students' relationship, not with AI, but with writing. So I'm going to close with a final point. So the phenomenon, I'm checking the time, great. So the phenomenon of AI is complex. There is no doubt about that. And a lot more work and research needs to be done for us to understand it. But what these findings point to is not the centrality of AI with regards to students' experiences, but they point to the centrality of writing in students' academic lives. So writing is where language, thinking, argument, feedback, academic integrity all come together. So when students turn to AI, they are not stepping away from writing. In many cases, they're trying to stay engaged with it, to clarify ideas, sustain momentum, to meet academic expectations more confidently in a second language. So, in other words, they're using AI to solve writing related problems. So, if we focus too narrowly on AI itself, risks, rules, tools, all this hype around us, we risk missing that bigger picture. We risk missing what students' use of AI tells us about how writing is taught, how writing is supported, and how writing is experienced, and what pressures they're navigating, and how our pedagogy, our feedback, our assessments may shape these experiences. So I'm going to stop here. And of course, there's time for questions, I believe, Phil, but I have some questions for you for some reflection. You don't need to answer them now. And I know that there's going to be breakout room spaces, so we can discuss them there. So this is the reflective question. How do these findings may make you think about your context in relation to student agency, writing, feedback, assessment? So you can take a picture if you want. I'm going to pop them in the chat as well for later, for some reflection. Thank you very, very much. Do get in touch if you want. I'll stay and engage with your talks, with the following talks and the breakout rooms. So do get in touch, do connect. Thank you very much.